intro to what it's about. And I'm actually going to be talking about sort of what I've been working on recently, which is sort of CLASP NG, like the next generation, which is sort of moving towards a more maturity model-oriented view of the right way to approach building a software assurance program within an organization, and talk through sort of some of the pieces and parts that have been built out around a maturity model sort of approach to accomplishing the same task. So to that end, in terms of what we'll talk about, we'll first do like a quick review, as I mentioned, and then I'll talk about what I'm calling the Software Assurance Maturity Model, or SAM, and we'll talk about how it works and what you would be able to do with something that's a maturity model, rather than the, what you can't do, I guess, with CLASP today. So some of the advantages, I guess. So for those that are unfamiliar with CLASP, it stood for the Comprehensive Lightweight Application Security Process, which is super long-winded, and probably most of the time that people saw that, they were asking me how it could be comprehensive and lightweight at the same time, and I don't have a good answer for you. But in any case, the CLASP project itself really has a lot of resources that are available today. You can go to the OWASP wiki and examine any of the materials that are there. Basically, it was meant to be prescriptive and proactive in terms of the activities that it prescribed adding into a software development lifecycle. So these were really kind of centered around 7 sort of key best practices that were sort of the higher level structure. And then underneath that, you would have a lot of extra information. So there was 24 different activities that were defined, and those activities ranged in size. Some of them would be something like code signing, and some of them would be like buy a static analysis product and incorporate it into your whole development process. So they weren't exactly consistent. But it also defined roles, and it allowed you as sort of a security expert to sit down with it and say, okay, these are the pieces that I think I need, and it gives you a lot of details on how to go about implementing those activities or executing them. So it was good in that sense. So as I'm sure folks are already familiar with, there are lots of other approaches to incorporating security into your software development lifecycle. You have Gary McGraw's touch points, which is the diagram that you see on top, and then you have the Microsoft, you have the Microsoft SDL, which is sort of the diagram that you see on the bottom there. Now, both of these are just basically different approaches to accomplishing the same thing that CLASP did. So when we sort of looked at all of these and said, okay, what lessons can we learn about each of these different methods that have been used? Because each one has sort of an important lesson to teach us. So if you look at Microsoft SDL, it was built through what they were actually doing at Microsoft to squeeze all the bugs they could out of their software. And it turns out that I think the SDL process is a bit heavyweight, and it's really appropriate to someone that's a large ISV selling box software. If you're in a different kind of industry, it's maybe not the most appropriate process for you to be using. It doesn't work the same if you're just a financial organization, for instance, building and deploying your own applications. SDL is not the best. If you look at the touch points, they're great high-level points that show you sort of where in the SDLC you need to be thinking about applying security activities, but there's not enough details, there's not enough meat underneath it to tell you how to actually go and get it done. So you still have to have a lot of magic that goes behind the scenes there. And when you look at CLASP, some of the lessons learned from that is that it's a large collection of activities, but there's nothing that tells you what priority each activity should be given, what order you should be adopting them in, or what kinds of organizations need to be focusing on which kinds of activities. There's no real mapping between that. It's just sort of a bucket of activities that you can pick from. So as I mentioned before, it's good for security experts, but a little harder for people that are just trying to figure out the right way to model their development process if you're just a dev manager and you don't have any particular security expertise. So the motivation, I guess, for building a maturity model approach was there's a couple of key points here. So one is that simple, well-defined, and measurable is always going to trump anything that's complex, nuanced, or ethereal. Right. So if we can make it concrete and solve the problem for 80% of the people, cut and dry, then we're winning. Right. The other 20% that might need the nuanced and subtly changed stuff, we can handle that. That's not a big deal. Now the other sort of tenet of our approach here was that software security has a lot of activities involved in it that span a wide variety of individuals and different organizations. Groups inside your organization, I should say. So you have everywhere from release to the people that are doing QA, to people that are doing the development implementation, to people that are even doing the strategic planning for the whole organization or the whole development group. So it touches a lot of parts of it. And there's no real single formula that's good for all organizations. Every organization has a different risk profile because of the way they build and use software. Now, there may be a lot of organizations that kind of group together, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but there's not one formula that's going to work for every company that's out there. And the last one is that an assurance program is not something that you just drop in overnight, right? You have to ramp up to it and you have to build up to it. So any maturity model has to allow you to slowly build that capability over months and maybe even years, and not assume that you can just hit a switch and like automatically start your entire development group behaving differently overnight. So that sort of leads us to the actual software assurance maturity model. So let me talk a little bit about what's actually involved in SAM itself. So the goals that we had in mind were really to kind of define the building blocks for an assurance program so that you can actually sort of have the bucket of Legos of what you could build with, right? So really to define a few silos of improvement and say, okay, these are the areas that you can improve, and now we're going to define what it means to actually improve each one of those and define some levels. So we'll take a look at that in 1 second. But we also wanted to allow organizations to create customized roadmaps. So as I mentioned before, there's no single formula good for all organizations. An organization needs to be able to take the maturity model with all the information that it provides and really kind of come up with what's tailored for them. So if you know best about your business, right? I'm not going to try to tell you what you should be doing. I'm going to say this is a general model and then allow you to tweak it and make it yours if you need to. And then we also wanted to provide sample roadmaps for different types of organizations. So, if you're an ISV, if you're an online service provider, if you're a financial services organization, if you're a government organization. So we have some sample roadmaps that go along with it to show you how it works. So let's actually dive into the guts here and see how SAM itself is constructed. So it starts off and we have 4 high-level, what we were calling disciplines. Now, this is all still, sort of beta. We're working on it and collecting feedback on it. So a lot of this stuff may shift slightly, but we think we have the general structure about right. We're still, working on names for certain things. But the idea is that you have 4 major silos of activities that you could basically be improving upon. So you have alignment and governance activities, which are basically related to anything that's kind of cross-cuts your organization. So the things that you decide sort of at the organization-wide level. You have requirements and design, so basically everything you're doing proactively to help make your software better before it even gets to the coding stage. You have verification and assessment. Now these are things that occur during the development lifecycle really, while you're actually in implementation and even when you're done with implementation when you go into testing and so forth. And then you have the last silo, which is deployment and operations, which is sort of the last mile of, okay, now that we've built the software, what are we doing to make sure that when we roll it out into production that it's actually maintaining any of the security posture that we planned it to have. So when we actually dive into each of these disciplines, because these are really just categories, we actually get to sort of the meat of it, which is, the 4 disciplines need to be broken down into the actual areas of improvement or the maturity areas themselves. And that is what you see here. The 12 areas that are here, basically 3 under each of the disciplines, define the 12 possible things you could be improving in your organization. So let me at least give you like a sentence summary of what each of these are. Because we've actually collected feedback from some people already, and it seems like we're gonna make a few subtle changes to this. But we have education and guidance, which is really sort of the training-focused part of it. How do you actually train individuals in your organization? You have standards and compliance, which is your approach, and really this is one that's